From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Tuesday, October 21, 2025. What's going on with Barnaby Joyce, the talented, mercurial, confounding politician who can distill an idea better than anyone in politics, says he's quitting the National Party, declining to run at the next election, and maybe considering joining Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Today, Greg Sheridan on the latest in an opposition struggling to hang on to its own talent.
Today I'm acting Prime Minister. I will be for a couple of hours until the boss gets back from New Zealand, unless his plane crashes, in which case it's a permanent thing.
Barnaby, is your job, as the Americans would say, just a heartbeat away from ultimate power?
People have been watching too much West Wing. They've got to stop it.
If we start letting movie stars, even though they've been the sexiest man alive twice, to come into our nation, then why don't we just break the laws for everybody? So it's time that Pistol and Boo buggered off back to the United States.
Greg Sheridan is The Australian's foreign editor, which means we usually invite him on the front to explain the Byzantine, internecine politics of the Middle East, so I can't think of anyone better to explain what's going on inside the federal coalition. The latest news is that Barnaby Joyce, one of the most talented political communicators of our age, is blowing up his relationship with the National Party, but I can't really fathom why. Greg, can you shed any light on what exactly has got Barnaby Joyce's goat and why he says he's leaving the Nats?
Well, Claire, I think Barnaby Joyce is a symptom of a wider crisis in the Liberal and National parties. They can't work out how they want to proceed as an opposition and whether they should restructure and whether they can restructure. I think all of them are getting seduced by the idea that the road to success lies in some realignment of right-wing politics. And plainly, Barnaby Joyce is being wooed by Pauline Hanson's One Nation. It's no secret that Barnaby Joyce and David Littleproud, the Nationals leader, richly detest each other.
It is a reality. The relationship between myself and David over a number of years is, well, it's broken down, and it's very sad, but that's just what happens in some human relationships. It's not really conducive to being effective for me nor effective for them to remain in the room.
I think Joyce has never got over losing the leadership. He was an immensely talented political figure, but his personal problems got in the way of his political career, and it is an indictment of both him and David Littleproud that they haven't been able to find a way to work together. You know, successful politics all over the world is full of teams who don't like each other. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, John Howard and Peter Costello. Not one of those pairs exchanged Christmas cards or went round to each other's house for dinner or anything, but they were very effective combinations. And coalition politics now is in a terrible crisis of mediocre performance and grandiose dreams.
Barnaby Joyce was elected as a senator in 2004 to represent the National Party for Queensland. And he said at the time that the then Howard government couldn't rely on him, couldn't take him for granted, that he would behave in Parliament to best represent the people who'd elected him. But he became an incredible asset for the coalition, didn't he?
That's absolutely right. So politics is full of paradox, and there is a tension between being a big personality and working as part of a team. And when Barnaby was first elected as a senator, I think the coalition needed his vote to pass legislation. So they had almost uniquely in history, I think, a majority in the Senate, but it was a majority of one. So if Barnaby went the other way, they didn't get their stuff passed. And he made a big fuss about that. But he was a compelling personality. He was a natural populist, which meant he had a good instinct for how people felt about issues. And he was someone who liked to be the centre of attention. That is true of many people who go on to be effective leaders. And often the only way to cope with someone like that is to make them leader. And he switched to the lower house and he became leader, and he was a very effective leader of the National Party.
Barnaby Joyce, despite his very broad accent and his presentation as kind of a simple country accountant, was a highly intelligent, very well-educated person who thinks very deeply about big philosophical ideas. He was able to articulate things, though, I always thought, Greg, in a great way in terms of sort of retail politics. Like, I remember him talking about the $100 Sunday roast, the $100 roast lamb. That idea really helped kill off the carbon tax, the emissions trading scheme.
It'll be the end of our sheep industry. I don't think your working mothers are going to be very happy when they're paying over $100 for a roast.
He had that ability to synthesise things that almost no one else has.
The problem with the opposition now is that none of them has a persona which is well known to the Australian people, which stands for anything. They have no definition about their political personality. Whereas Barnaby achieved what every politician wants. He kind of became a celebrity, but he also became associated with certain issues and certain approaches. Now, the super genius at all this, of course, was Tony Abbott. The great thing which killed off the carbon tax was the great big tax on everything. But the opposition can't do that at the moment. The only memorable phrase they've come up with in 3.5 years of opposition was James Patterson the other day talking about how the Albanese government was producing the Victorianisation of the Australian economy. Now, part of the art of opposition is to come up with memorable images and phrases which capture a reality and then which also damage the government by capturing that reality. And I wish they would think of themselves less as Winston Churchill in his wilderness years and more as people who haven't done very well at their job and need to try a lot harder. I mean, a lot of it is energy. One thing to like about Barnaby was that he was just boundless energy. He just bounced around all the time. You couldn't shut him up. You know, you once got on the phone with him or met him in a corridor or something and, you know, he'd still be talking at you 28 minutes later without apparently drawing breath. You know, he could breathe through his ears or something and you needn't say a word. Successful opposition politicians that I've known, like Kevin Rudd, Tony Abbott, Josh Frydenberg, they have that relentless quality. They're full of ideas. They come up with memorable phrases and images. And no one in the opposition is doing any of that at the moment. They're talking about whether they want to restructure to be a populist party or a free market party. But to be any kind of party, you've got to be a great campaigner. Now, Barnaby Joyce is one of their strong campaigners, and they're not making any use of him. But that's across the board. How can it be that Andrew Hastie, Jacinta Price and Matt Canavan are on the back bench and that Dave Sharma, you know, he carries out the oranges at half time or something? This is like a cricket team captained by Graham Yellop, which has decided to keep Damien Fleming and Alan Border and everybody off the field. It's just, and that reflects very badly on the leader, but it also reflects very badly on the people who are on the back bench. Neither side is willing to compromise intelligently in order to be an effective opposition. And not one of them is Charles de Gaulle or Winston Churchill in disguise or anything. They just need to learn how to work and campaign hard before they get a fit of the vapours about what's the nature of the party that they belong to.
Someone who does have a good radar for political talent is Pauline Hanson. Now, her One Nation party is quite overtly circling Barnaby Joyce, Andrew Hastie and Jacinta Price. What's your sense of Pauline Hanson's role in all of this, Greg, as populist right-wing parties rise around the world?
Well, Hanson deserves credit for her durability. Having said that, Hanson is quite a limited populist leader. She's never, except for the first time she was elected in a fluke as a Liberal, she's never had representation in the lower house. She doesn't look as though she could threaten to form government. Now, Australia has not had a really competent populist leader or party. I mean, Clive Palmer gave the right-wing parties a lot of money, and Pauline Hanson is as near as they've come to someone with mainstream appeal. Barnaby Joyce would certainly be very formidable, but it's very hard to imagine that Canavan or Hastie or Price joins One Nation and One Nation wins an election. It's infinitely easier to take over the Liberal Party or to just run your policies from within the Liberal Party than it would be to run a new party. Our voting system and so on makes it extremely difficult. First of all, it's compulsory voting, so everybody votes, including that 30 or 40% of the electorate who pays no attention at all. Well, somehow or other, you've got to be able to talk to them. And also the populist parties like Giorgia Meloni in Italy, who've come to power, have done so generally with 25 or 28% of the vote. Now, in a proportional representation coalition system, you can lead a government with that. But in a preferential system, if you're off to the right and everyone else is centre or left, then all the preferences will drain away from you and you might get 28% of the vote and 5% of the seats. It's a million times easier simply to reform the party you're in. In the United States, the populist revolt against failed mainstream policies occurred within the Republican Party. So Donald Trump didn't found the America First Party or something. He just took over the Republican Party. Tony Abbott, when the Howard government was defeated and Brendan Nelson gave him a contemptible shadow portfolio, nonetheless, he stayed on the front bench and 5 minutes later he was the leader. I am confused beyond fathoming why Andrew Hastie would go to the back bench. It is a self-indulgence for Matt Canavan to be on the back bench these 5 years. The same with Jacinta Price. These people are depriving the nation of their talent when we've never been more in need of leadership. And as I say, that reflects very badly on the leader of the party, who is meant to manage her team. It reflects very badly on them. The Nationals have done well in the last few elections. They've held their seats. And yet, here they are, all at war with each other, half of them in a furious sulk with the other half, refusing to serve on the back bench, threatening to leave and join other parties and so on. Whereas really, fellas, get over yourselves. There is a nation which needs governing, come back to work, do your day job, make life hard for the government, not for each other.
Coming up, how much blame should Susan Lee be bearing? Susan Lee created this shadow cabinet and obviously created some serious problems for herself by, as you say, sidelining talented people. Then her next move was to send them something with the grandiose title of a charter letter, including key performance indicators and expectations for them towing the line, really. What's your take on the skill with which she's actually running this group of people, Greg?
Well, like everyone, I wanted to give her a fair go, and I still do. She's a nice person and so on. She makes a contribution. But this is surely the dumbest act of leadership you could ever imagine. If poor old Ange Postecoglou coached as badly as that, he wouldn't have lasted for 39 days. I tell you what. I mean, how can you deal with someone like Jacinta Price, who is obviously a bit egocentric and a bit sensitive and so on, and lose her over some nonsensical bit of rubbish like her comments on the Indian community? What Jacinta Price said was stupid, but she was never going to apologise. So why would you send Alex Hawke out in order to make everything as bad as it could possibly be? Why would you send a charter letter to Andrew Hastie instead of talking to him about the role that he wanted to play in immigration policy? What is the difference between Andrew Hastie and Susan Lee on immigration policy? One is going to propose a very big cut to immigration, and the other is going to propose a very, very big cut to immigration. I mean, from 2 yards distance, you couldn't possibly tell them apart. How could you give Dave Sharma such a ridiculous nonsense non-job? Sharma effortlessly masters all media and actually, in a whole lot of policy areas, knows what he's talking about, whereas most of these Liberals can barely get through their talking points. And he already has a profile. So why wouldn't you say, let's get the ball to Sharma quickly because he can make yards up the middle? Instead of which you say, no, he's got to stay on the sideline so that all of our anonymous hacks who voted for me in the leadership battle can get promoted. This is rank dumbness. This is a weak party, lacking in talent, and the leader determined not to use the talent that's there because it's not from her faction, and then so mismanaging the thing that it's likely to fall apart. Now, I think it'll be a miracle if she manages to hold on to the leadership until the next election. The deepest tragedy in Australian politics is that Josh Frydenberg didn't recontest the seat of Kooyong last time and win, because the opposition now would count for something. And as a result, we'd have better government because the government would be under some pressure. Whereas at the moment, this opposition wouldn't blow away an air balloon. You know, it's just completely inconsequential.
Greg Sheridan is the Australian's foreign editor. You can read Greg's analysis, plus all the latest news, sport, politics and business right now at theaustralian.com.au.